Western media in the wake of the Rushdie affair, in the wake of the cartoon controversy, in the wake of the Facebook controversy, and the question again and again was raised, why are Muslims reacting so wildly, so violently on publication of a mere cartoon? I think the answer was given by the Kerner Commission. In its report after the Watts riot in the United States, Kerner Commission made a fundamental distinction between what is called the trigger and the fuel. The trigger was an incident of petty racism, but the fuel was provided by centuries of racism. The lesson is clear. The country needed to address the consequences of a history of racism, not just its latest manifestation. In other words, Danish cartoon was only a spark. It was only a trigger, but the fuel that ignited the fire of hatred and bigotry was being piled up for decades, if not for centuries, against Muslims. Why is this bit of history significant for us? The television and radio programs in the United States did not change because the law had changed, for no such change happened. The reason for the change was political. It was not legal. For sure, there was a change of consciousness, but that change was triggered by political developments. Media had learned civility. More likely, it was taught civility. Many had learned that there was a difference between black people laughing at themselves and white people laughing at them. It was like the difference between blasphemy and bigotry. That learning was part of a larger shift in American society, beginning with the civil rights movement. This larger shift was the inclusion of African Americans in a restructured civil and political society. Can we deal with the hate speech by legal restrictions? Because any time there is a controversy about Salman Rushdie or cartoon or Facebook, our first instinct is go to the court, go to the legislature, make a new law, ban this, ban that. And our high courts in Punjab are doing exactly the same thing. Every other day, there is some irresponsible entry in one of the websites, and somebody goes to the Punjab High Court and they said, ban this, remove that. My question is, can the hate speech be dealt with legal restrictions? I'm not very optimistic about this. Hence, I considered laws against blasphemy and the recent Organization of Islamic Conference move to write an international convention on blasphemy will not only be unnecessary, but it will be ineffectual. The law can be a corrective on individual discrimination, but it has seldom been an effective restraint on hate movements that target vulnerable minorities. If the episode of the Danish cartoon demonstrates one thing, it is that Islamophobia is blatantly growing in Europe. The real challenge that we face today is both intellectual and political. The intellectual challenge lies in making a distinction between two strands in the history of free speech. As I said, blasphemy and bigotry. The political challenge lies in building a local and global coalition against all forms of bigotry, not only against Muslims. The growth of bigotry in Europe seems to me an unreflective response to two developments. Locally, the dramatic growth of Muslim minorities in Europe, and their struggle for human and citizenship rights. And globally, we are going through an equally dramatic turning point in world history. The history of the past centuries, particularly 5 centuries, has been one of Western domination. Beginning in the 16th century, Western colonialism understood and presented itself to the world at large as a civilizing and a rescue mission. Mission to rescue the minorities and civilize the majorities. The irony is that a growing number of mainstream European politicians in Great Britain, in France, in Germany, and in Scandinavian nations, perhaps nostalgic about their lost empires, are experimenting with importing these same time-tested rhetorical techniques into domestic politics. The idea is to compile a list of barbaric cultural practices among the immigrant minorities in their midst as a way to isolate them, to stigmatize them, and to frame them. And it is in this context that the Israelis, for such a long time, have been able to sell their ongoing settler colonialism in Palestine as a civilizing mission. It is in this context that the international community, still dominated by a Western Eurocentric sensibility, refuses to see how, quote unquote, the natives of Palestine have been oppressed under a military occupation. And that same international community, with the same approach, has gone along with the punishment of Ghaza for its crime of electing the Islamist political party Hamas and not its current favorite, Al-Fatah. The severity of that punishment came to head in the latest scandal of the Turkish flotilla that was raided by Israeli commandos. Shouldn't the champions of free speech and freedom of expression for Salman Rushdie and for the Danish cartoonist and for the Facebook be reminded that freedom from occupation and freedom from oppression is as important as freedom of speech? In fact, there can be no freedom of speech in the context of oppression and occupation. And here we can link the tragedy of Gaza with what is happening with reference to the controversy with the cartoons and with the Facebook. But the world is also changing. New powers are on the horizon. Most obviously China and India, but also other powerhouses of the global south, Brazil, South Africa, Turkey, they are emerging. Neither China nor India, as we know, has a majority Muslim, but both have significant Muslim minorities. The Danish case teaches us by negative example. To the hitherto dominant Western minority, it presents a lesson in how not to respond to a changing world with fear and anxiety as the Western societies are responding, masked with arrogance, but rather to try a little humility so as to understand the ways in which the world is indeed changing. And just like the struggle against bigotry and hate speech is not primarily a legal one, but a political one, so is the case with Gaza and Palestine. There are God knows how many United Nations resolutions and international agreements, treaties, that Israel has routinely violated decades after decades. International law, despite being on the side of Palestinians, has not stopped the carnage and dispossession being inflicted in the Holy Land. It has been and will be political and politics and